Apologize. We had some crazy technical difficulties, but for those that hung in there, thank you so very much. This is, what is our episode number? Episode 88 of Tech Sales Insights, and really excited to have Jennifer Haas with us today. She is the CRO of Knock and an awesome SaaS CRO, and has done great things, and I'm sure will continue to do great things in the future. Her title topic is the modern CRO, grit, hypergrowth, and embracing change. Awesome topic. We're sponsored today by Spotlight and SalesBricks. They are in the up-and-comers category of sponsors for sales community. Spotlight is guiding and arming reps to become great value sellers. So think about kind of value selling and kind of the importance of that. And then SalesBricks is in the kind of CPQ, config price quoting space. Finally, a company fixing legacy CPQ, like a delightful deal desk that results in happier sales team customers and more revenue. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But certainly, I think any company, big or small, getting the config set, getting the pricing set, getting the quote set are always, for lack of better words, a pain in the butt. So Jennifer and I were trying to figure out how we really knew each other or met. We're not sure. We think it was about 10 years ago or so. So I don't have any great stories about when we met, but certainly have been in touch a lot since then. Definitely highly respected in the industry, great reputation, extremely authentic. She's had some great lessons learned that she'll be sharing with us as CRO at smaller companies, and then working at some larger companies like Oracle. Interestingly enough, her interests are boating. She's actually a yacht captain, hiking, and she does a lot to give back. Lives in, kind of goes between Seattle and Orange County, so certainly great places. And most importantly, she's a great wife and mom to 2 grown stepsons. So let's jump into the questions and definitely look forward to your insights. For those that are watching along or listening along, feel free to post any comments or ask any questions. So maybe starting off, you can just kind of briefly let us know a little bit more about Knock.
Sure. So Knock is a software as a service company, SaaS company, and we focus on prop tech. So by prop tech, I mean typically the multifamily space. So our customers are ownership groups and property management companies, and we work with all the big property management software players, and we focus on the front office.
Wow,
really
awesome.
Exciting, dynamic little vertical to be in.
Awesome. Great. Nice to have a nice niche and swim lane to focus on, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So our title topic is modern CRO, grit, hypergrowth, and embracing change. So when you think about grit, kind of how does that come into play, and why do you think it's important?
Yeah, so grit is one of the major things that I look for in people that I hire. There are kind of 3 things that are like the big 3 that I look for. Does someone have grit, and are they resilient? Are they curious? And are they solution oriented? So I want to make sure that I've got folks that are willing to dive into a challenge and can stand up if they get a no or if they get knocked down and figure out a different solution. I want someone that's going to be able to focus on not only these are the things that need changing, but this is the solution that I think would be the best fit for us. I want people that can dynamically change, and we can get to 80% and then pivot and adjust, because things happen fast in a startup. So perfection is kind of the enemy of growth, right? So we want somebody that's going to be able to iterate on the fly. Yep. And be able to, take no, not take no for an answer, and figure out if the front door is closed, let's figure out how to get through the back door or the chimney or through the basement, right? So I think those are the 3 things that are the most important for folks when we're bringing them into the company.
That's great. And when you said knock down, I assume no pun intended.
No pun intended.
So speaking about Backdoor, so obviously we've all had that a lot in our career. Kind of any creative things that you've done after being told no to be able to get back in?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'll say I have gone through the back door quite a few times in terms of like figuring out, different ways. I'll give you an example. When I was early on in my career, I ended up figuring out that trade shows were a really good way to get my name out there. I was just starting out in medical capital equipment, and I did not have any experience at the time, and I really wanted to work for GE. That was my target. So I was able to get in to trade shows. I couldn't buy a ticket. They wouldn't allow me to. So I ended up having to get in a couple of other ways. I was able to set meetings at these trade shows, and these meeting invitees would get me in. Sometimes I had to go through the kitchen. I tried to go through the traditional ways, and they wouldn't allow me to. So I had to figure out a different way because I was getting in there. So that's what I'm talking about. I was able to get into all of the big industry trade shows, and I went in with my resume, and that was a great way to meet sales managers. So nobody else was doing it. The sales floor was empty when all of the talks were going on. So I was able to meet other sales leaders, other sales managers, and I ended up meeting a good bunch of recruiters that way as well. And I got 3 offers from GE that way.
Awesome. Yeah, great training ground for sure. So that starting out as a, I'll say kind of first sales job, what are the, kind of some of your takeaways and maybe thinking about, you've got, kind of that versus a startup from an early career?
Yeah. So can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So basically, what are some of your takeaways from, early days of that kind of, I'll say, GE sales training?
Absolutely. So GE was a great training ground for me. It was my really first enterprise sales role. I had done some tactical kind of SMB, kind of one call close to 30-day closes. This was more, 6 months sales process. So it was a really good, effective sales ground. I would say are not very tolerant of ramp or, getting your feet under you. You have to really start and go. So it was one of those things that, really honed my sales skill set. I would say KPIs, daily, weekly, monthly KPIs, and making sure that every day, do you look back at that day and say, I moved the ball forward in these 3 different ways. Really, time management was really important. At one point, I had 16 states. And I had to figure out what the low-hanging fruit was. That was really important because if you are focusing on the wrong things and you have to prioritize, you're not prioritizing the right things, then you're never going to be able to meet your goals. So I would say time management was huge. Cold calling. I mean, I remember doing 70 to 100 cold calls a day. Then I would set my meetings and my weeks around certain geographies so that I could hit, Seattle and Portland and the surrounding area for 4 or 5 days, and then pop back home and then regroup. So it was just a constant, I would say that grit comes back up. Are you doing the right things every day, every week? And are you making sure that you're not just hiding in busy work? Are you moving the ball forward?
Yeah, for sure. And those are all great kind of sales 101 things that, people should be doing these days, probably, truth be told, not as much as they should. So we have a question from Jesse. And for those that are watching along or listening along, certainly please feel free to comment or ask any questions. Basically, he asks if you had to bail your sales team out of Google or LinkedIn jail, too many connections. So I think the LinkedIn jail is if you have over 30,000 connections, which may not be the case with some of your folks, but certainly with Google email delivery, domains these days can be getting hurt. So your cold outreach can be going into junk, which is a big bummer, of course. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, so we have dealt with that before, and we have a specific marketing team that is working to make sure that doesn't happen. So right now we're good, but yes, definitely something that your marketing and sales team need to keep in touch with, and making sure that you are able to deliver all of those emails, right? If you are if you have a big, broad subset of your potential TAM or your potential SOM that you are emailing out to, and it's either not getting there or you're getting a lot of unsubscribes or, you're not able to deliver, that would be a huge impact on the business. We've had that happen, but it's also tied into the rest of our business as well. So if we go into jail, our customers go into jail. So it's something that we're very tightly focused on.
There you go. And then what about hypergrowth?
Yeah, so hypergrowth, obviously, really, really important as a startup. It is important to continue to iterate. The companies that get to from 1 million to 5 million, you can run that differently than 5 million to 20, right? 20 to 50 is a whole different iteration. And I would say, when you're focusing on hypergrowth, you've got to really focus on the right team at the right stage. And then who are your investors? What are the goals of your investors, of the entire company, and making sure that you are aligning your talent with the goals of the company at the stage that you're at. That's really important, because what gets us here doesn't necessarily get us there. So you need to be able to iterate and change with your business. There are things that I call, people call, that put into buckets, pulls and corks, right? So you've got folks that can really iterate and change and scale with your business as it grows, as kind of like a growth strategy. And some people can expand and grow with the business, and some really like certain stages of a business. Some are more generalists and some can be more specialists. So as you get into larger and larger companies, the different roles get more myopic and they get deeper. When you're a generalist and you're kind of wider, you go an inch deep on a bunch of different topics and everybody wears 20 hats. Some people really like that. Other folks are more cut out to be specific, specialists and go deep within a specific topic or a specific role. And that's kind of more where we're getting to right now as our organization expands.
Gotcha.
So some people can move you, and some people just really like a certain stage, and you have to kind of move on, or they will self-select out as you get into these, more specific roles.
Yeah. So around that, you talked about embracing change, but if you think about kind of figuring out, who's on the boat or not on the boat, any things you've done there?
Yeah. So attitude is a really big deal. You want to work with folks that are positive, but that are also real. Folks that are too positive and not willing to see, any challenges, that can be difficult, because if you're not willing to look at things pragmatically, you can't fix challenges if you don't see them, right? But then on the other side, you also have to be positive and be able to focus on the good as well, because if you want to focus on the negative, there's always plenty, right? There's challenges and issues, but, keep focusing on where you're going as a company, and make sure you're focusing on the things that you can change and the things that are in your control. And that's when it gets really fun.
Yeah, one thing I did years ago at HP, I had a team that was just about 4,000 folks. And I remember at a kickoff, getting up and just saying, kind of based with my management team, kind of here's the priorities, here's the focus areas that we want to do, and here's kind of what's important to us in terms of your performance and your attributes, and kind of would go through them. And I could tell by looks on some of these people's faces, I said kind of, obviously there's some of you that are, I'm new, so I don't know, but there's some of you that are for sure doing these. And there's, probably most of you are not. And you've, shame on the company, you've probably not been trained in these areas. So we're happy to help train you to improve in those areas. Or if it's something you just look at and say, I don't want to do it, please self-select. So, sometimes getting people to self-select, in an honorable way is good for everybody, because then you just don't, drag things along. Right.
Yeah, I think that's important. And it's part of what I call acquiring a team. When I come in to a new organization, that first 30 to 90 days is absolutely critical, as you know, Randy. Right. So it is really important to be able to acquire the team, ask a lot of questions, get to know people, get to know the culture of the organization, the tribal knowledge. So just kind of absorb and be a sponge, and come in with what I like to call non-pointy elbows. You want to come in a bit soft, right? You don't want to come in swinging and assume that you know everything, more than anybody else at the company. You got to learn and absorb and figure out what you can change, what's worked well, what has not worked well. So I like to put together a SWOT, and I like to put together a stop, start, continue as kind of a way to enter into an organization. I like to find out what the company goals are, what people's personal goals are, because mentorship is super important to me. Mentorship and sponsorship, and all goes with leadership and developing your teams, so that they can get what they want in their careers as well. This isn't just, only company goals are important. People's goals are important as well, or they won't stay with your company. So that's important. And then figuring out what's the low-hanging fruit. What are the things that I can control? What's in my jurisdiction? What are the things that have been tried? Where are the gaps? How can I fill them? And then figure out what levers can I pull? And what levers in the first 90 days can I pull to have the biggest impact on the business in a positive way with the least amount of disruption? So I want to disrupt our customers the least amount possible and our teams the least amount possible, and have the best benefit for the business in the short term, and then start putting together that longer term, 12 to 24 month strategy.
Absolutely. And then you were kind enough to contribute in my book, Your Go-To Sales Advisor. You already touched on one of them, the 3 ships: mentorship, sponsorship, leadership. So thanks for heading me off on that. But then you've got another really good one that's lots of lessons learned. We can do a whole show on it, but hopefully
Absolutely.
maybe come up with 3, 4 highlights. But questions to ask when thinking of joining a startup. And we don't need to get in the details, but obviously you were burned, for lack of a better word. So kind of what are maybe kind of 3, 4 key questions you have learned to ask going forward?
Absolutely. So I would say it's all a learning experience. So, all of these things, if you are used to being in large companies, it's a different due diligence process, right? So if you're dipping your toe into early stage startups, wonderful, amazing opportunity to learn super, super fast. So talk about hypergrowth in terms of learning. Wow, right? So I came from GE, HP, Cisco, and Oracle. Very different to move into the startup land. I would say startups, much faster paced, very different skill set, running an entire P&L, having a chief title. If you want those kinds of experiences, which oftentimes, if you're even in the SVP level in these large companies, you don't get. It's a really nice balance to a skill set in a Fortune 50 executive role. So I would say, in terms of due diligence and the questions to ask, I would say, really dive into the numbers, really dive in and make sure, the checks and balances, trust but verify. I would say that the biggest thing that I would do is reach out to folks that either work at the company or used to work at the company. That was one thing that I never join a company without reaching out to folks that have worked there and can give me a true idea of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I don't mind big, hairy problems, right? Like, I don't mind challenges. It is the reason why I'm typically drawn to companies, is because, gosh, I've seen those challenges before. They're exciting to work through. They're fun to solve, and it makes things dynamic. You are always going to have, good, juicy challenges to work on with startups. So I would say just make sure that you have an appetite for the specific challenges that are the biggest ones right now for that startup. And, again, ask the questions, dive into the financials, talk to a board member, talk to the C-suites, make sure that the executive team is functioning well, make sure that you're looking at the board decks, that you're looking at the rolling 12, and you really understand where the company has been and where it's going. Make sure that things are reasonable, make sure that things are tracking, make sure you're excited. You've got to be curious and excited about the opportunity, about the vertical, about the customers. So startups are across the board. So as much questions as you can ask, make sure that you add some more due diligence time when you're joining a startup, because it's really important to dive into what you're really going to be doing. And then also your span of control, understand your span of control and what you have the autonomy to do.
For sure. And then I think from a contractual obligation perspective, people are always going to be verbal, saying, "Oh, we'll do this, we'll do that," and then unless you get it in writing, it's not going to happen. So that's I think across the board, I've seen that.
Very good point, Randy.
Seen that a lot. So moving on. So I know you're passionate about authenticity and that you'd rather address the messiest challenges first. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of an eat the frog kind of person. I like to.
What would you say? Eat the frog?
Eat the frog. Have you ever heard of that?
No, eat the frog. There you go.
So it's the biggest challenges first, right? Like whatever you really don't like to do. So if you're at Orange Theory and you really hate those, the long runs or the fast runs or the HIT training, do that first. Get it out of the way so you don't have to worry about it. So I would say that's kind of, I go towards the challenges first, get those out of the way, but I don't like to put blinders on. I'm a positive person, but I feel like I'm more of a pragmatist. So I look at things not through rose-colored glasses. I look at things as they are, and then I focus on what's the positive stuff.
Okay, great. And then how do you inspire authenticity in your teams?
So authenticity in my teams, I like to be as transparent as possible. Some things I can't share, but I like to be as open and honest as possible. I find that if people know the reason behind why, the why behind, where you're going, it really helps them to get on board.
Gotcha. And you've had some great posts for sure. One was, if you can maybe explain combating artificial harmony's seductive pull.
So, everybody always wants to feel like everything's perfect, right? And nobody likes to hear, feedback and constructive feedback. It's difficult, right? So if you don't make a safe place for people to be able to be authentic and to be able to give feedback, authentic feedback, and it's not a psychologically safe place, then you're not going to get feedback, right? And you're not going to change in the right way. And just because you're not hearing the feedback doesn't mean that people aren't talking about it or are not feeling that, right? So if there are things that are in my control to change, I want to know about them so that I can authentically deal with them, because there might need to be changes. Cultures shift, things change, different needs for different people that you hire, different verticals, different geographies, different people need different things. So if I can adapt and give folks what they need and change with the needs of the company, then I'm going to do that.
Certainly. And then another great one was about effectively reducing politics on your teams.
Yeah. So that's another thing is just being transparent. Also kind of nipping things in the bud. If you see someone digging a hole under someone else, making sure that doesn't happen. Oftentimes I see in large companies, these kinds of things happen. Someone reaches the edge of their skill set, and instead of just focusing on getting better themselves, sometimes it's easier for certain kinds of folks to dig holes under other people. That's something that is never healthy in an organization. Also skip leveling, making sure that if you are an executive leader, that you're supporting your managers and your directors and your VPs under you to be able to be leaders in their own right, and that you don't have people skip leveling and reaching out to you to handle things that should be handled by their leader. I understand that certain things go off the rails and you might need to step in, but as much as you can empower your leaders to be leaders themselves, it helps them grow and helps them be able to have that executive gravitas that is important as you're leading a team. So I like to empower my team.
Yeah, and I'm sure, especially as a leader, I always found it useful to say, okay, it sort of theoretically the buck stops with me as a leader. So if there's issues or complaints or whatever, just come to me. And if you got to skip level, who cares? But the enemy's outside, not inside. But unfortunately, people's wacky behavior, and especially now with Zooms, it's harder to do that face to face. So there's a probably increased level of passive aggressive and things like that happen. But you brought up some great points. You also mentioned
I respect the chain of command to start. I understand that there's always reasons why it would be appropriate to skip level. At least I expect there would be an attempt to handle it directly with any challenge directly with the person that created it.
Sure. And you also have a great quote from John Maxwell: "We're never down. We're either up or getting up."
I love that. So it fits my growth mindset. I have a growth mindset, and I know that if there's something I don't know, it's something that I can learn, and I can grow into that. So I think it's a good reminder to make sure that if you don't know something right now, it doesn't mean you're not always going to know it. Like, learn it. figure it out, become an expert in that. We're not born with what we've got. We can expand our skill set and stretch. And I feel like a day without learning is a day wasted. So I'm always trying to grow and stretch myself into new situations.
Wow. So the next one, Jesse and I did I forget what it's called on LinkedIn, but it's LinkedIn's version of a Clubhouse yesterday on getting to the C-suite. And I wish I would have mentioned this, but you say if asking for time from an exec, be brilliant, be brief, and be gone.
Absolutely. So I think that it is, execs, we want to help, right? We want to help grow people's careers. We want to do favors for folks. I always like to watch out for folks, but it's really helpful for me if someone can be very clear on what they need from me and how I can help them. And if I can't help them, I'll try to get them to somebody else that can. But the ones that really need help iterating and figuring out what you need, that takes a lot of time. So if you can help someone out and, be brilliant, be brief, be gone, this is what I need, this is how you can help me, I really appreciate it, and be grateful. Be grateful they're gifting you their time and they're busy, so they're carving it out from something else that's also probably pretty important.
That's great. And Brian posts figure it out, and he says fit fos. I think if I had to guess, that means figure it the F out. So you got it. Absolutely, Brian. And Brian, stay on because we'll going to talk about some of our tools and things they're doing in a little bit, which you might have some interest in. Now, you also had a crazy post that was talking about the younger generation. You're wondering if people actually have two overlapping jobs. And fortunately, it looked like the response was roughly 80% people believe they do not. But is that really the case? I mean, we're not talking about like somebody that's a waiter, waitress at two different places. This is like tech jobs, right?
Yeah. So what I was referring to was two full-time salaried jobs. I am hearing that some of the younger folks, to make ends meet, are having to carry two full-time jobs, which one is sad because I'm sure that's stressful. But it also left me thinking, from an ethical perspective, if somebody is expected to give 40 to 60 hours a week here is pretty normal, you don't have the time to do two. So you're really shortchanging both. So from my perspective, and I think that most agree, that if it's not one of those where you're working your salary job and then you do something at night, or you're driving an Uber on the weekends, that's not necessarily what I was referring to. It's doing two full-time jobs and having to mute one Zoom while you're in another Zoom, and having two different phones, and basically like completely gaslighting. That was a surprise to me that is something that is tolerated, because most businesses that I've been involved in, if they found out, you would not have a role.
Yeah, it's crazy. I do a weekly post you might have seen that's I might be old school, but that's definitely going to go in there. It's definitely ethics and integrity.
Might be old school if you just have one job. I don't know. I don't know that this is the future, but I don't know. I don't have the time to do two full-time jobs. And then ethics, integrity, everything else. Exactly.
So it might be old school, but and then Mike Parentino, great to see you. Mike says, Jennifer, awesome job.
Hi, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Feel free to ask a question as well. And then love this next one. You talk about being told that you're appreciated is one of the simplest yet incredibly uplifting things you can ever hear.
It's free, to appreciate your team. I think it's really easy to just focus, on results and celebrating results, but, and then doing things, as a group, celebrating the group. I think it's really important to have personal reach out. So I like to carve out time every day and every week to make sure that I'm reaching out to folks and really appreciating this one specific thing they did, or pulling in an account, or, everybody works really hard. And especially since we're 100% virtual. So most of the time we are not seeing each other on a weekly basis. We're not in person. And to have somebody notice what you're doing, and to make a phone call or specific email or reach out on Slack, personally, makes a really big difference. And then also I like to make sure that I'm acknowledging people publicly as well, because that's a big deal. I want to put people on a platform. It's part of sponsorship, right? So if somebody's doing something, I want to make sure that other folks know that they're doing it. And I never take credit for anybody else's ideas. I want to make sure that if it's somebody on my team's doing something amazing, I want to highlight them and be a platform for them and allow them to grow.
Yeah, I used to when I was at, I guess my last 3 corporate jobs were storage techs on an HP, and I sometimes just call people out of the blue, and you're like, is there anything wrong? Am I getting fired? Like, no, like, are you kidding me? Like, no, I just want to say thanks, great job, and also say, behind the scenes here we have Tucker, who is, sweating it out with our technical issues. So thanks for all you do, Tucker, with this and other things. And Jesse, you asked the question before. They're my cohorts with the sales community. So thank you, Tucker, and thank you, Jesse, publicly. Now, also, you've been traveling for work. I saw your Cinco de Mayo in Austin. Kind of how was Cinco de Mayo, and how's been your traveling for work?
It was great. So it was actually San Antonio. So we went to San Antonio with
Okay, sorry.
Our Knock advisory board, which is a subset of our amazing customer folks that help support us and make sure that we've got our roadmap in the right direction. So it was a lot of fun to celebrate and also get feedback on our roadmap and some of our new offerings that we have just launched. We just went into AI. So we just launched our AI voice offering for Knock, which is really exciting. We've gone from a single SKU company. Now we've launched a couple of new SKUs. And so we're evolving it as a company and really monetizing our individual units, which is really, really exciting to be able to slingshot our company forward and talk about that hypergrowth. This is what's doing it.
Wow, that's awesome. And now I know you're a big fan of value selling. So kind of what does that mean to you, and any lessons learned along the way?
Absolutely. So I think selling on price is always a race to the bottom. If it's a commoditized sale, no one wins there. Margins just get shrunk, and generic players can kind of jump in and ride on the coattails of the folks that did kind of innovate in the beginning, right? So it's something that I try to stay away from. I try to make sure that what I'm selling is differentiated, and that there's business value and business impact tied specifically to the product that I'm selling or the service that I'm selling. And I want to make sure that it's defensible and differentiated. So with that, you can then get into value selling and why is this different? So you can ask the questions around the goals, around the pain points, and then you can use that to differentiate your talk track, and really dive into focusing on the business goals of the customer and then the business impact that your specific thing or widget is going to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, probably broken record on this, but if you're in the elevator with the CFO and you got 30 seconds, what are you going to say? It's not a bunch of techno mumbo jumbo. It's how you're going to help them generate revenue, save money, get a competitive advantage. If it's compliance, stay out of jail. But it's kind of, what is that true value? So, and just for what it's worth,
know your audience, right?
Know the audience, yep.
Right message, right time, right person.
Yep, absolutely. And commercial for Spotlight. That's a lot of what they do as well. So what about some examples of maybe sales leaders that you respect and why?
Sales leaders that I respect, my goodness. I've worked with a lot of wonderful sales leaders. Sue Bersamian has been a great mentor. Sue's fantastic. Robert Vry, I have stayed in touch with and really enjoy working with him. Eric Coe has been, a really great leader that I work with very closely still. Josh Brezin. There's just a ton. I mean, I can think of 20 off the top of my head. But yeah, I think everybody brings their kind of specific, skill set and tribal knowledge to the forefront. And there's always something you can learn from every leader, either what to do or what not to do. So I love to pick people's brains, and I love to just kind of watch what they do.
Gotcha. All right. Awesome. So we'll just say those are your 4 favorites. Just kidding. I know there's others. So Nadav, who full disclosure was Spotlight, says probably meant to say, how do you do it at scale, helping the reps, arming the champions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you have a sales team of 100, how do you enable a sales team of 100, right? So the big thing for me is when you do have, I'm a fourth line leader, which means that I have 4 layers of management under me. How do you make sure that you are enabling all the way down to the individual contributors? And it can be challenging. So I would say the right thing is to make sure that you're hiring the right leaders, because those are the ones that are going to be empowering and enabling your sales team, and touching them every day. So you can make sure, like when I come into an organization, I make sure that all of the foundation is built. Do we have the right sales stages? Is everybody trained? Do they know how to do a proper discovery? I mean, that's the biggest thing. Do they know how to ask the right questions? You can't push the sales cycle forward if you haven't uncovered what it is that makes the customer tick and what's important. So I would say, making sure that they have the foundational building blocks and making sure that you have the right leaders at the right levels of the organization are critical.
Absolutely. Now, what about importance for you of kind of sales ops and rev ops? And that function has definitely improved immensely over the years.
Super, super critical. So I would say I am attached to the hip to my RevOps group. I have had RevOps and sales ops report into me. I've had it in, kind of a bit of a siloed team cross BU. There's multiple different ways to kind of organize that team, but super, super critical in making sure that the tools work together and making sure that the data integrity is correct and on target, making sure that the leads flow the way they need to. RevOps, sales ops, operations in general, super, super critical. So this is a big team to get right, and need to make sure that you have the right counterparts.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about, speaking of sales tools, any kind of favorites that you have?
Oh my gosh. Well, we use Gong very effectively. We use G Suite. We use Microsoft Office as well. We kind of go back and forth. Those are fantastic. We use HubSpot for our marketing side, and Salesforce. So they have to work really well together. We are enabling NetSuite right now. So we are rolling that out. Zendesk is another one that we are currently enabling. So we've got a ton of tools across all of our different BUs. We are a tech company first and foremost, so it's important for us to be able to utilize the right tools.
Gotcha. So maybe talk, the Gong's a sponsor of Sales Community, so certainly I always like to give them some airtime. How have you found it using Gong?
We love Gong. So this is one of the ways that we really make sure that we train up our reps, that we check on and make sure that they are focusing on the right things, that they're asking the right questions, that their tone's coming off well. We also really train our new reps using Gong. We give them access to all of our historical Gong calls as well. So it's a great training tool for us.
Oh, fantastic. And we both have Kelly as a friend in common, so she's doing a great job leading the company there. And then I think in our prep session, you're talking about that you're kind of investigating some ways to improve on the CPQ, config, price, and quote side as well.
Absolutely. We are in the next 60 days working on completing our CPQ integration as well. So that is going to make sure that our data integrity, that our contracts are all flowing through correctly. Before I came on board, we're all over the place in terms of our contracts. And this has really allowed us to put together a new pricing structure, new pricing and packaging, and be able to effectively roll that out across our organization as well. We're also using IronCloud, which is a repository for our contracts as well. So between CPQ and IronCloud, we're going to be cleaning up a lot of the challenges that we've had.
Gotcha. I've not heard. So IronCloud?
IronCloud.
Clad. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. For the contracts.
So it's a repository for for our contracts, so that we can easily query and look up our contracts, because we've got hundreds and hundreds of customers now. So keeping all these straight, knowing when we have renewals, who's signed, and it integrates with DocuSign, which we use as well. So yeah, lots of tools out there, really great stuff. So CPQ has been really good for us.
Awesome. And so is that a consult? Is there a kind of consulting group or actually a kind of platform tool that you're using in the CPQ space? I know it's not directly under you. Are you familiar by chance?
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
It is more of a challenging integration. So
Yeah,
if you have any suggestions, Randy, happy to hear it.
definitely. All right. I don't know why Brian from Salesbricks isn't chiming in, but I'm sure we will follow up afterwards. So moving on here, you've been great. So for those watching along, Jennifer Haas, the CRO at Knock, if you want to chime in with any additional comments or questions, please feel free. And sorry about the late start that we had. So maybe talk about any mentors that you've had and kind of memorable advice that you've received.
Yeah. So my gosh, that's a great question. Memorable advice. The be brilliant, be be bold and be gone. That's a good one. I think
I'll give you one while you're thinking. We won't name the company, but one of your prior jobs, I said, unless you get that in writing, it's not going to happen. Oh, no, they're going to take care of me. They're going to take care of me. And then, 9 months later, like, oh my God, Randy, you're right.
I think that a lot of these is as you make these mistakes, all of a sudden it becomes part of your Bible, and
Absolutely.
Randy, you taught me that when I'm looking for going into a new company, right? The what do you call it? The kitchen sink list. All the things to ask and to get buttoned up before you join a new company. I've probably doubled it as well. So I'll probably pass it back to you. But all these things are all things that you live and learn. You get burned by something and all of a sudden you're just like, all right, not doing that again, right? Especially the painful ones. You remedy those real quick for next time.
Yeah,
definitely.
All lessons learned. Yeah. I mean, Ken Doherty, who's a good friend, went to a earlier stage company and it just didn't work out, and he's kind of all bummed out. And I said, hey, it's great. Just think all the lessons that you've learned, and operationally, kind of forcing you to get your fingers dirty. So if you're at for you at an HP and an Oracle, there's a lot that you have to do, but there's a lot you don't have to do. But then going to a startup, figuring out and honing those skills. No matter what size company you're going to be at, small or big, that just makes you, that much, better talent and, better, if you want to call it, better athlete, better coach, but certainly great going forward. What about any
getting an MBA?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, real life MBA. And
exactly.
What about any advice you would give your younger self?
Yeah. Goodness, I would just say, be patient, be kind to myself. I've always been harder on myself. I have high expectations of myself. I hold myself accountable as I do others, but I have to remind myself that, with myself, I need to be patient and, relax a little bit. That's one thing that I definitely would tell myself. I've always put a ton of pressure on myself, and it's not always quite as necessary.
There you go. What about how you've seen the CRO role kind of evolve, right? So we had, VP of sales, it was kind of just sales, now CRO, and what do you think about that relative to the different functions? And then how do you see, I'll say maybe like a marketing and customer success kind of evolving going forward?
Absolutely. So I would say there's a bunch of different ways and different flavors that you can kind of build out, chief revenue officer. There's not a right way or a wrong way, but what I've seen work the best is if the entire go-to-market function is under that chief revenue officer, and there's kind of, for lack of a better word, one throat to choke, right?
Yep.
So all of these, I have put together kind of my SaaS playbook. Talking about how all of these organizations work together. And if everything is not in lockstep, hand in glove, and busting up those silos, it is very, very difficult, because marketing is kind of the tip of the spear. They create awareness, they soften the ground for the sales team, they create a sense of urgency and an excitement out there in the market. The sales teams pick it up and kind of run with it and grab it. If you have an inside sales team, that might be an interim step, and then go into the account executives that are pushing that that sales process forward. And then you go into, the integration team and starting into the customer success and, consulting, make sure that, that customer, the due diligence and the discovery is completely done, that they know what the goals are, they know what the integrated tools that you need to integrate if it's a SaaS organization, because all of that's important from a customer experience. So, and then going into, all right, now they're an account that is happy and established, they're getting the value out of it. Now we want to either expand them, or we want to get references, we want to sell other, upsells to them. And that goes back into the sales motion, right? So it's kind of this self-fulfilling SaaS enterprise life cycle that I like to call it. And it all works so closely together. And then in lockstep, product marketing works very closely with engineering and product to make sure, are we putting together the right product roadmap? Are we executing in the right way? Are we meeting the customers where they're at or where they're going to be? What's the competition doing? That's all conversations between product and product marketing. So very tight integrations in all of these different groups across all of these BUs, right? So it's important to know how they all play together. And then as a CEO or a CRO, how does everything play across the go-to-market space? Whether it's under you or not, it has to be tightly yoked.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe final question, or close to final question here. So you're kind of guru on the SaaS side of things. You've already touched on a lot of great things. Any other kind of nuances or best practices around kind of leading sales at a SaaS company?
Yeah. So I can tell you that if I have somebody that is polished, that they have experience with an enterprise sales cycle, I can teach SaaS. Everybody's just like, do I have to have SaaS experience to be, effective in SaaS? I would say no. That's something that I can teach pretty well. What is more difficult to teach is understanding, specifically some verticals are harder than others to understand and to get indoctrinated. In our industry, relationships are super, super key. So those take a while to, so someone that has enterprise experience and they have multifamily experience, I can teach SaaS. So SaaS is just a consumption model. It is not an actual technology. I've heard people talk about it as kind of a technology. It's not a technology. It's just a consumption model, and I can teach that. So SaaS, I think, is the way of the future. I love talking about business impact. So I absolutely love the space. And we'd love to get more people into it.
There you go. So any, I mean, in all fairness, a lot what you just touched on is kind of, I'd say, generic to anybody in sales. But kind of when you say teaching SaaS, so what are any nuances that are within that in kind of the difference with selling SaaS?
Yeah, so you're not selling necessarily something that you can taste and touch. It's not like hardware, and it's not a one-time sale. You're setting up ARR, or annual recurring revenue, or monthly recurring revenue. So your net ARR and what you're bringing in and how you're growing that is really the focus, instead of just revenue, right? It's you're being billed monthly, quarterly, yearly for your customers. So it's typically recurring. You have longer term customers. So they don't buy from you just like hardware, one time every 3 years or every 5 years, or when something wears out, or when they have, a new cohort of employees that come in and they need desktops, for example, or laptops. It is an ongoing, and it's almost like it's just a different way to consume. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know I said last question, but and then what about with this kind of the differences that you've seen with kind of compensation plans relative to for lack of better words either product sales or on-prem sales as a kind of one-time sale versus.
Sorry.
No problem. You can put the person on speaker. We'll say hi. Hey.
Yeah. That's one of my reviews.
So anyway, so kind of any nuances or differences with a SaaS comp plan?
Sorry, I missed that one with that call coming through. Can you repeat the question?
No, right. Yeah. Any differences with a SaaS comp plan versus a traditional one-time sale?
Yes. So you need to decide how you're paying on recurring revenue, right? So differences here. So if you sell, a year contract, right? You're going to have a renewal the second year as long as things go well. So you have to decide, are we going to be paying on that renewal? How we do it is any new business is something that they're paid on. The renewals, as long as you don't get an increase in that kind of net ARR from the customer, then they don't get paid on that again. So it's basically just you're tasked with growing that customer. So the comp plans do change a little bit.
Awesome. And it's also been interesting for the, I'll say some of the resellers, right? So the resellers traditionally pay on gross profit, which if you sell if you sell a product for 100,000, the cost is 60,000, there's a profit of 40,000, you pay the rep, whatever, 15, 20% on that, on that gross profit. That's the old model. But then now the new model, makes it a little bit harder, right? Because that channel partner isn't necessarily getting in all that profit right away. It's kind of spread over time. Lots of kind of challenges and nuances there.
It's metered out, right? So instead of getting one big bite, it's metered out sometimes over years.
Yep, absolutely. So anyway, you have been fantastic. There you go. So you've been fantastic. Jennifer Haas, CRO of Knock. Thanks for joining our episode 88. Thank you to Spotlight and SalesBricks for sponsoring. And for those that are not members of Sales Community, feel free to join. You can go to salescommunity.com and you'll actually see the little link that says summer free. So you can get a free year membership. And if you click on that and use your LinkedIn, I think it takes all 15 seconds to join. And for next week, we had our guest that we had to reschedule. So Sean Green just says, which is great for retention. Great work, Jennifer. Absolutely. Paying overtime is excellent for retention, Sean. The other great SaaS leader there. But anyway, I think we are close to having Corey Dyer, who's CRO of Digital Realty. So hoping that works out for what will be our episode 89. So for those that did watch, thank you very much. And my guess is most of you are going to be watching on the recording. So feel free to pass it along and share. And have a great rest of day and a great rest of week. And Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Randy.